Hello again. We are going to be continuing our study through the Sermon on the Mount. Today, we're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 5, verse 4. Very similar to the verse that we had yesterday in Matthew chapter 5, verse 3. So I'm going to begin again in verse 1 of chapter 5 and then read to verse 4. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Now, when we have to look at this in context, what is Jesus referring to about those who mourn? Now, we know in one sense that the Bible is very clear that God is close to the brokenhearted, close to the contrite in spirit. That's from Psalm chapter 34. God says that we can grieve and come to him. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 says that when you grieve, right, meaning that grief is going to happen in this life because we live in a fallen world and we're going to see things that are hard. We're going to suffer. There's going to be sadness. But we grieve not as the others do who have no hope. The grief that we have as Christians always grieves with hope. And the reason why we can have hope is first, we mourn. And I think what Jesus is trying to drive home here is that we mourn over our sin. Blessed are those who are grieved when they sin against God, for they shall be comforted. One of the marks of a true Christian is those who hate their sin, who are saddened, who are grieved from wronging God. In 2 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul writes about grief. There's a worldly grief, really is just more upset that you face the consequences from your sin. Maybe that's the loss of reputation or a position, but you're not really grieving because you wrong God. I think what Jesus is trying to draw out here is blessed are those who mourn, who realize that they are sinners in front of God. We think about the Apostle Peter when he was in the Lord's presence after Jesus performed a miracle with the fish. Peter said, Away from me, for I am a wicked man. I am undone. I am a man of unclean lips. This is the sense of all Christians, is that we one day realize that we are sinners and that we grieve our sin, that we have wronged God. And then we turn to him. We fall upon God's mercy and beg him to save us. And we know that there's salvation for us because Jesus came while we were yet sinners, while we were yet far from God. He came and died for us and rose from the grave. So now, all of us who mourn over our sins and turn to God will be comforted. We'll be comforted in the forgiveness that only Christ offers. We will be comforted in the eternal inheritance that God has promised for us in Jesus Christ. So I guess maybe the question to have for you, have you mourned over your sin? And that's not just for when we first become Christians. It's kind of a continual mourning. Is there any sins in your life right now that you are not grieved over? Things that you know that the Lord is not pleased with and you have yet to turn from them? I would just encourage you to turn. So first question is, are you mourning over your sin? Are you mourning over your sin? And secondly, are you experiencing the comfort that comes from God through Jesus Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit?